Do note that the incorrect examples are exaggerated on purpose so that the issues are easier to see. In my opinion, the correct examples do properly show what they are meant to show. However, they are in no way perfect. As an exercise, see if you can spot issues with my form in the correct examples. If you do, go down below and leave a comment. In this episode, we'll take a look at the Zwerchhau and see how to deconstruct it and apply basic body mechanics and cutting theory to it. For those who are not familiar with the Zwerchhau, it is a horizontal cut which is done so that it can be used as a counter-attack against any descending cut. It can be done from the dominant side using the short edge, and from the non-dominant side using the long edge. These are not the only uses for Zwerchhau, but they demonstrate the technique well enough for our purposes. I will not be repeating the basic theory of how to deconstruct a cut like this and then how to apply basic body mechanics and cutting theory to it. If you want a detailed explanation, please refer to the Schielhau episode. As a really short reminder, you want to start at the end position of the cut and then work your way back to the starting position. Before getting to the technique itself, let's start with a short recap on horizontal cuts and their issues. The Zwerchhau is generally seen as a horizontal cut. MS3227A describes the cut as having one flat below, one above, and the edges to the sides. The other manuscripts define the cut as turning the thumb below. In Meyer's treatise from 1570, the Zwerchhau can be even understood as a slightly ascending cut. The debate on the exact angle of Zwerchhau is way out of the scope of this series, so let's just agree that it is more or less horizontal. Technically speaking, anything but a completely horizontal cut is no longer a horizontal cut. This is also how many cutting competitions treat this. Anything off of completely horizontal is penalized. I have a bit of a different approach to this. I take the actual application of the cut and the movement pattern required into consideration. This leads my opinion to be that there is a considerable grey area between horizontal and diagonal cuts. The same is of course true with vertical cuts. This is especially true with the Zwerchhau, as the definition in the manuscripts is not that strict to begin with. You might remember that the current academical and very strict approach to defining things is quite different what it used to be. Because of that, flats pointing up and down and the edges to the sides, in my opinion at least, could mean basically anything close to horizontal. On the screen, you can see a visualization of what I roughly consider to be vertical and horizontal. The lines are drawn plus minus 10 degrees from completely horizontal and completely vertical. This leaves 20 degrees for both horizontal and vertical cuts, thus leaving 70 degrees for each diagonal cut. As I said, I think that the transition from horizontal or vertical to diagonal is a grey area. Do not take these numbers as a absolute truth, they are just a rough visualization. Also remember that anything from completely horizontal is technically no longer horizontal. Zwerchhau can definitely be done so that your hands and the blade of the sword are level. However, usually the cut is described so that the point is lower than your hands. In some applications of the cut, this is very much necessary. This brings us back to the umbrella effect I described in the horizontal cuts episode. You can visualize the issue like this. The point of the sword is moving along the hem of the umbrella, and your sword is one of the ribs. As you cut, the sword travels along the surface of the open umbrella. If you imagine watching this from below, you can now see that the sword is moving in a circular motion instead of a straight line. This is what I call the umbrella effect. What this means is that the sword is always turning ever so slightly. The curvature is actually rather small, but it will have a noticeable effect, especially with wider targets. Keep this in mind with this cut. If you need a more in-depth explanation, you can refer back to the horizontal cuts episode. Once again, let's start with deconstructing the cut, as that is the point of this episode. To recap, Zwerchhau is a cut from the dominant side. It is done with the short edge so that you catch any descending cut of your opponent. The sword should be held so that the edges point to the sides, the thumb is under and the sword is in front of your head. With the cut, you should try to hit your opponent to the head. As Zwerchhau is basically just a high horizontal cut from the dominant side, let's start from the end position of such a cut. With this position, we fulfill 3 of the requirements. We can hit the head of our opponent, the edges point to the side, and the sword is in front of our head. We can fix all of the remaining issues with a single change. Those issues are that we need to be able to catch all descending cuts from our opponent, we need to cut with the short edge, and we need to have our thumb under. To fix all of these, we just basically need to transition to a thumb grip. Simply rotate the sword so that your thumb comes under. To keep your wrist straight, you need to bring the sword up a bit, roughly to eye level or higher. This also allows us to catch all descending cuts. You do not want to have your arms directly under the blade. As you are trying to drive the sword sideways, you want to have part of your hands on the side of the sword. Those parts being the palm of your non-dominant hand and the base of the thumb of your dominant hand. Now that we have a proper end position, it is rather easy to backtrack our way to the starting position, especially as this is basically just a horizontal cut. Start by simply rotating towards your dominant side until you have your center roughly 45 degrees to that direction. Now you need to get back to the card on your shoulder. Instead of going directly to your shoulder, you want to follow the cutting trajectory. Bring your arms to your shoulder in a nice arc. This makes it easier to make the actual cut. As you can see, in theory, Zwerchhau is a very simple cut. The issue here is that it is a horizontal cut. This makes it a rather difficult cut to cut with. Once again, I will not show how to transition from a handshake grip to a thumb grip, as that was already explained in the Zwerchhau episode. If you need a more in-depth explanation, please go and watch that episode. Once again, I recommend that you start practicing this cut already in the thumb grip. And after you can do it properly, then you can add the transition in. Now, let's see the actual exercise for this technique. Stand in the card on the dominant shoulder. Have your dominant foot forwards and hold the sword in a thumb grip. Your shoulder line should point roughly 45 degrees to your dominant side. Extend your arms so that they are centered and your hands are at eye level or slightly higher. You want to extend your arms so that they move in a smooth curve starting from your shoulder, moving slightly towards your dominant side and then back towards your non-dominant side until they are centered. During the extension of your arms, you need to drop the point so that it is at level with your hands or a bit lower. Stop. Make sure your arms and wrist are straight and your edge is correctly aligned for a horizontal cut. Also make sure that your hands are at eye level or a bit higher. From there, cut using rotation around your spine. With this cut, the issues are the same as with any other horizontal cut, mainly keeping your sword level and keeping yourself level. For a more in-depth explanation, please refer to the horizontal cuts episode. After you can do this exercise consistently, you want to once again transition doing this in a one smooth action. When targeting with the Zwerchhau, remember, you must be able to catch your opponent's descending cut. This means that you can't really lower your hands that much. Thus, the only ways to target lower are to have a lower stance or by angling your point down. This naturally shortens your reach. And that is Zwerchhau. As you can see, in theory, it is very simple. The hard part comes from actually making the cut good enough that it, well, cuts. In practice, it is actually rather difficult to keep the trajectory straight and the edge aligned, as you have a slightly compromised grip and you are cutting horizontally. In my opinion, this is one of the easiest specialty cuts in theory, and maybe the hardest in practice. It is rather easy to catch your opponent's cut and just hit them. The hard part is actually being able to cut with the cut. Zwerchhau as a technique has a lot more depth into it, but this is enough for our purposes here. As this is the last episode of the specialty cuts, I will leave you with an exercise. Use what you have already learned during this series and use that to learn to cut from the non-dominant side. You want to use the long edge to perform the cut. Also, learn to target low, basically under the armpit or lower, with both the dominant and non-dominant side versions of the cut. This should be trivial if you just refer to the horizontal cuts episode. In the last 2 episodes of this series, we will be taking a look at the basic diagonal short edge cuts. Before we get into the recap, go and stab that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Start deconstructing more complex techniques from the end position and work your way back to the starting position. Zwerchhau is a horizontal cut, so concentrate on keeping yourself and your sword level. Remember to keep your hands at eye level or higher.